So Dan is a right-hand man of a rather famous other rock mixer that you may have heard of, a little man called Andy Wallace. How the heck did that happen?
A totally random way of meeting Andy Wallace. I'll give you the quick story. A friend of mine, his name is Steve Ertl. He owns a local hotel in the area. Anyone who knows Andy personally, Andy's a car fanatic. So Andy does car tours every year. They ended up doing a tour and staying in my friend Steve's hotel. So I ended up talking to Andy Wallace's wife and said, "Oh, what does your husband do?" "Oh, he works in music." "What bands does he work with?" "Oh, like Nirvana and, Linkin Park." And Steve's like, "Oh, that Andy Wallace." So he immediately calls me. "You got to get down here. Andy Wallace is staying at my hotel." I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go bother Andy at a hotel when he's on vacation or whatever he's doing. So Steve kept calling me every day. "You got to get down here. Andy's leaving tonight." Turns out I finally go down there about 10 p.m. Andy just get back from his car tour. Andy's walking in. Andy and his wife are walking in from the car tour carrying like groceries or whatever they had for the day. And like, "Hey, Andy, how you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm good. Steve's been telling me about you. You have a studio in the area." And we just sat down for a drink. Didn't talk about music at all. I didn't bring up music at all. Just Andy already knew I had a studio in the area. And we kind of just talked for about an hour. We hit it off. And he said, "I want to come see your studio one day." I was like, "Okay, yeah, no pressure whenever you're around." The record came up during the pandemic, Gojira record. And Andy was working a lot at Miami, Criteria. And Andy didn't want to work in Criteria because it's a very busy studio. He's worried about COVID and all that kind of jazz. He said, "Hey, Dan, can I come by and see your studio? I have this project." I had sent Andy some of my work, and Andy knew a couple people that have worked with me. So he knew that I'd be able to do the job. But I think really it was mainly our first conversation. He kind of knew. And I think Steve, my friend Steve Ertl, was hyping me up. And really, I got thrown into the Gojira record with Andy pretty quickly. I had spoken to Andy's mix engineer. Can't remember his name now. I'm sorry. And he had given me a lot of the ways Andy likes to work. He'd sent me templates. He'd sent me some routing. It was a little bit nerve-wracking. But, I think I delivered on the record, and Andy was super comfortable here. Andy has kind of a cool thing that he does. He brings his RV with him, and he stays in his RV, even though we have an apartment in the studio. And Andy likes to stay in his RV as he listens to his classical music out there.
How did Ghost happen? What's the story behind this incredible record that dominated the charts?
So we had worked on Impera, and that did really well too. That got up to number 2 on Billboard. So that record went really well. Andy and I worked on that together. We did the Avenged Sevenfold record, Life is But a Dream, together. A bunch of other lesser known records. I actually did Andy's record with him. Andy has a band called First Friday. So Skeleton came about. I think Andy has done 4 or 5 Ghost records. So Tobias loves Andy. They were very happy with how Impera came out with us working together. And then we just started the new one.
So how does it work when you're working together on something like this? Did he take it to a certain point and you come in and do the tweaks? You're doing it together?
Normally what's happened, that the producers will send me the sessions, and I'll make sure, first of all, that we have all the plugins, because we want to open up the Pro Tools session, exactly how they had it. Because Ghost has an amazing team. Tobias is amazing. All their writers are great. The producers are great. So where they're leaving off on the production, it's up there. It's really good. So first I want to make sure everything opens up correctly. And then I'll probably spend about 4 or 5 hours getting it up on the SSL, beating their demo, because we'll always have a reference mix. And Andy will come in and, "How we looking, Dan?" I'm like, "I think we're in a good shape." And Andy will come in and do his Andy Wallace things for about another 4 or 5 hours, which are very, very small tweaks. Andy's really a balancing master. Doesn't do a lot of outboard gear. It's all SSL. It's all SSL EQ. It's all SSL compression. He's not inserting any kind of LA2As or 1176s. It's all balancing and slight EQ moves. And Andy will spend a lot of time on details. Then we'll send it to the team, the Ghost team, or whoever we're working with. And they'll usually have some revisions, and then I'll do the revisions. If it's anything really major, Andy will come and listen again, and then we'll send it back.
What's his master bus like? The reason why I ask is I use the master bus like a sledgehammer. My mix on an SSL would be like, here it starts. Here's the beginning of the song. and now it's over.
Yeah.
You know, I abuse the master bus. I find that it just kind of just trims out some of those spiky little things, and it ends up just limiting it ever so slightly. It's not distorted or anything at all, but it just kind of rounds things off beautifully. And the reason why I mention it is because that was kind of what I started gravitating towards, hitting it really hard. Then I got to sit in with Bob Clearmountain, and he's just tapping away gently, and it's amazing. What's Andy's approach? How does he use the master bus?
Like you, brutalizes it.
Yes.
No regard for the metering, and it sounds great. We'll know when we have to push it back, when it starts to, But with the 4K, as you know, you can really hit that master bus hard.
Yeah.
And the only thing on the master bus when Andy's working is just the master bus compressor. Nothing inserted on the master bus. I do it a little different, but nothing. Just the master bus compressor, the 4K compressor, and he's brutalized.
You've got the threshold turning all the way to the right because,
of course,
you're hitting it so hard.
Yeah, if it could be more right, we could use that.
Oh, that's great to know, because that's what I always felt like when I heard those records. I thought, they're being annihilated, and I loved it. But when I saw Bob, who's obviously Bob, like one of the greatest of the greats, and he was all beautiful and dancing around 0 dB, I was like, oh my God, am I doing this wrong?
How do you do that?
I was like, how do you do that? I just keep pushing into it. Now, you say you do it a little different. Are you using like some Pultex or something, or GML?
Yeah, how I like to do it, I've had the same master bus train for quite a while now. I'll insert a DW Fern tube compressor, and I'm not compressing at all. I'm just running it through the tubes because I kind of like the weight of the DW Fern, but it's still clean. I have Pultex. I love Pultex. So the DW Fern's a little cleaner, but it has a lot of weight. Right. And then I'll use a Better Maker passive EQ. Once in a while, I'll use the Bus Plus rather than the console compressor. So if it's something with real super heavy bass, I'll sometimes, because I'll use the Sidechain.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's like such a big turning point.
Yeah.
Was the ability to sidechain. As much as I love SSLs, especially for mid-range and all the detail and everything we can do, and I presume your EQ into compression, yes? Like boost the high end into the compression, right?
For sure.
Because it gives you that that SSL kind of spank, I like to call it. I remember struggling on mixing. It was an Aerosmith record I was mixing, and I remember struggling with the low end because I tracked all the basics of the drums and bass on my API. And when I did a rough mix on the API with like no effort, it just came back just sounding so much fatter. Yeah. And I called Shelley Ackers, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
So I was like, Shelley, you mixed all those great records, Under a Blood Red Sky and all those huge albums that sound amazing on an SSL 4000. How do you get the low end? And he's like, well, I insert an API line amp into it.
Wow.
So it gives me more low end on the kick and the bass. And I was like, well, that makes sense because I'm trying to make it sound like it did on my API.
Yeah, I agree with you. I struggle with a lot of today's music, as you know.
Yeah,
we're competing with, hip hop and dance, and we're trying to get that same low end in rock. The 4K compressor struggles a little for me. Sometimes it works, but
But that's what's beautiful about the sidechain, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's imperative. I think you have to have it.
Andy mixed something for me a million years ago, and I'm blanking on what it was. It was a rock record of the early 2000s. One of the things he was really good at doing, and I wonder if this is sort of clicks with you in your brain, is one of his most powerful tools is the mute. Because I remember giving him like a pair of heavies and then a high-line guitar, which was blended in, and then like an alternative melody, kind of like, and I had it produced it so it was between the vocals and all this kind of stuff. When it came back, it was like heavy, one guitar. I gave him 5, he used 3. He doesn't seem to be afraid to just mute something.
He is absolutely not afraid to mute. Sometimes I would get a little scared about it because I'd be talking to the producer sometimes, because I'm usually the one talking to the producers and talking to whoever. And what happened to that part? If we're working together, and he'll look at the Pro Tools session, like, look at all the guitars and wants to make sure of what we have. And be like, what's that doing? That's not, let's mute that on and off. No, let's get rid of that one. So If it's not doing anything enough for, what Andy's hearing, he will mute it. Sometimes we end up having to turn it on and turn it back on and figure out how to get it, to make the producer or the band happy. But he is not afraid of mutes. I'm not as bold as Andy is in that. I like if the track's on in the Pro Tools session, I'll try to figure out how to, make it happen. But it's Andy's gift. He's got a skill at that.
In the early, like probably mid 90s, I remember two things I read on Mix, Sound, On Sound, whatever, one of those magazines, to an interview with him, where he said, now that everybody is editing everything, music's getting smaller.
Yeah.
It's a great line, because
it's awesome.
Instead of everything going like, God, now it kind of goes, da, 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 da. Like everything is so perfect that it sounds smaller.
It does. Yeah. I mean, Andy will never, if Andy hears a problem, he will fix it. But it has to be a pretty big problem. He's not going to go in and, if the drums are pushing in a chorus, that's how it should be, as long as it feels really well. Like a Rick and Gojira. I don't know if you're familiar with the band Fortitude. Yeah. The drummer and the musicians in that band, it's not gridded at all. If you look at their Pro Tools session, it's, some maybe younger engineers would look at it and be like, oh my God, that's a little ahead, that's a little behind. But the record sounds massive. It's like you can't touch that stuff.
I think for so many bands now, and don't get me wrong, because the root of this is a good thing, but they're learning how to produce, they're learning how to engineer, they're learning how to mix. I know we make videos for people that get us up all the time saying thank you for this, that, and the other. And I love that. But now, and I don't know if you're experiencing this, bands are turning up in the studio with the hard drive. They open up the Pro Tools session, and all they're really doing is going, okay, Dan, we need to retrack the drums with live drums now. But they've cut everything to program drums. They're recutting it. Now maybe they want to get better amp tones that are better than the emulations. But they're just sort of re-editing everything back to that programmed, MIDI, gridded kind of feel.
I just did that with a pretty famous band. I don't want to mention who the name was. We did go back and cut live drums to the program drums. We did get rid of the program drums, the Superior drummer or something. So we did bring the band in and recut live drums. We did recut the bass guitar with some amps. Some of the guitars stayed modeling like Kempers, which are fine. But these guys are such great players. I wish we would have spent a little more time miking up some amps.
It's letting that stuff just kind of breathe, but also the human interaction. It's very difficult. COVID kind of exposed how people have actually been making records for the last 10 years, because everybody's like, oh no, nobody's interacting and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, nobody's been interacting in records for years before that. It's a tough one, and I get it. Budget.
If I may, as far as Ghost and Tobias, they cut no corners.
Nice.
They have the budget to do it, but they didn't always have the budget to do it. But Tobias, he's a true artist. He does all of this for the right reason. He wants to make sure if bringing in a vintage amp, bring it in. We want to use it. They actually tell a little bit of a secret, and I think I could say this. I think it's actually Sound on Sound. I think talked about this. Some of the guitar tracks blended with the big amps are a Rockman, a Tom Schultz Rockman, and it actually added a lot. But the Ghost records are really a luxury. Andy and I originally mixed the album at my studio in Pennsylvania on my 4K. It was in the summer, it was August of 2024. I get a call from Tobias's manager in November of 2024. Or there was a text, hey, Dan, I have an idea and it involves you. And my text back was, I love ideas that involve me. Her name's Kristen. She said, can you come to Stockholm next week? Tobias wants to make a few changes on the record.
Nice.
Okay, next week. So I immediately started looking for a studio in Stockholm with a 4K. There was one, but it was booked. So I get on the phone with Andy and I'd said, Andy, I can't find a studio in Stockholm or nearby with a 4K. The only studio I can find has a duality, completely different console. I said, so we can't do any console recall. And Andy's word was, I think you'll figure it out. So it's like, Okay. So figured it out, right? So actually, I think turned out in the end to be a blessing. I really loved working on the duality. Andy couldn't attend these sessions, but he was, we were emailing back and forth and I was sending mixes back and forth. I had to do a lot inside of Pro Tools, sending out to the duality into the console, sorry, because you cannot hit the duality like you can the 4K.
No.
It immediately starts to distort. Not a knock on the duality. I actually enjoyed mixing the console, and I have a lot of friends at SSL. So, but
I must interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
One thing, though, you know this as an SSL user.
Yeah.
One thing, though, is it's not about overloading the channel; it's post channel. So, if that red light is like on the whole time, everything just sounds like sponginess.
Yeah.
People have told me, oh, I tried doing what you're doing. I hit it really hard. And I was like, well, they're like, yeah, the red lights were on the whole time. I'm like, no. You can't have the red light on. It just needs to flick on every now and then. It's going from fader to busing straight to the master bus. That's where it needs to be. Hitting really hard. Don't really interrupt you.
No. That's a very good point. So I struggled for the first couple days, and Tobias, the singer of Ghost, called me. And I think you can hear it in his voice. He's like, how's everything going, Dan? Getting everything? I'm like, it's going good. He's like, I think I'll come tomorrow. Because he was supposed to come that night. I was like, because I'm still trying to figure out how to get this console to feel like the 4K. Turned out, in the end, it's a very clean record. It's a little more open sounding than we had on the 4K. I like the sharpness of the EQs on the duality. I think they worked really well. But overall, I'm happy, but it was real learning curve. I was stressed out for a few days, for sure. Then I started, the first song we actually mixed was Satanized. And Tobias was, I think, blown away by the mix we did in Stockholm. And he said, can we do more like that? Because we were originally going to go in and do a few tweaks. But I ended up being 10 days turned into 3 weeks.
So you're taking the Pro Tools sessions that were feeding the 4000.
Correct.
Is that correct? So you've got any fancy EQ, compression, whatever that you've done on individual channels and busing that would have come down the SSL 4000. Presumably you take 2, 3, however many sources for the kick, and then put it onto one fader. Yeah.
Correct.
I know Andy is obviously very famous for using the sample to trigger the reverb. I've seen that in a couple of interviews, so that he doesn't use at least he said this a long time ago, that using the snare top, if it's compressed or whatever, and it's just bleeding, you're going to have like the hi-hat being fed to the reverb. He said he uses the sample, but is that true, first of all? And do you blend the sample back into the snare top, or do you have it on a separate fader? Same with the kick.
Yeah. So basically the samples are just basically white noise. There's a kick sample that does that, and a snare sample that basically does the same thing. And it absolutely is true. He's just triggering his reverbs with those samples. When we went to Stockholm, we kind of got rid of a little bit of that, because he does blend that sample back in. And if you listen to a lot of his records, you'll hear the that's that kind of white noise thing that creeps up in each mix. And Andy will EQ the sample to how it's reacting with the other drums. But it's absolutely true. There's 2 samples, a kick and snare sample. I hope I'm not giving up Andy's secret, but I think he spoke about this many times. And I have to be honest, I use the same plugins over and over again. Andy either. We use a lot of SSL plugins, LA2As, 1176s, all the normal. The only thing I'll use Soothe and kind of some different newer plugins, but it's really pretty basic, the plugins that we use. Now, one thing is, as you know, I have to own every plugin under the sun, because I'm getting so many different sessions sent, and there'll be some exotic plugins on certain sessions, and I'll have to go and get them, or at least get, a copy of them. And a lot of plugins companies have been nice to me and, given me licenses for certain plugins. A lot of SSL in their bundle, Ease mostly. I'll use Universal Audio LA2A and the Blackface 1176. Sometimes I'll use the Blue, like for the aggressive mid-range. I'll use a lot of lexicon verbs from UAD. I also started using some IK multimedia stuff recently. Joe Ciccarelli channel strip. So it's got a really, really nice drive for a vocal. You're doing something, you need a little bit of aggressive harmonic distortion. That plugin worked really well. And also, as you pronounce it, Metric Halo, their mix head. Have you used that yet? The mix head plugin?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And also one more, DB Verb, David Bendis reverb. Have you tried that yet for Metric Halo?
No, I haven't, but I do love that.
Great. You should try it. It basically it looks like an SSL console with small, medium, large, and extra large. I like it. It's nice and simple. I'll use Fab Filter, because a lot of times I mainly use Ted Jensen from Sterling for mastering. A lot of times I'll have, because bands, I can't send a band a mix that's -12 LUFS or something. I have to have it -8, -7. So I'll have a Fab Filter limiter on the bus just to make it loud enough for the band to hear. And then when I send it over to Ted, I'll send him actually a picture of of what I'm doing with the limiting, and I'll just mute the Fab Filter limiter. So I use a lot of Fab Filter stuff too. Nothing really special.
Depends how you define special. The subgen's a good tip because I've been wanting to know how I can get that same thing I get with the 120. Lots of people told me this, they told me that. There are all these different plugins, and not one of them sounds close. There's just something special about that piece of hardware coming back up through a channel on SSL that you just can't seem to get in a fancy plugin, but maybe made by SSL to do the same thing. One would hope. Bass guitar mixing tip, Dan. What I do is I take the DI and I use that for the clean low end because it's clean. Yeah. Is that what you do? What's your trick?
Yes, I'm always taking a bass DI, but I'm always using BAE DMP 1073 for my bass DI. I love the girth it gives. Yep. And so, yes, I'm always using the DI for my clean fatness. And then I'm using an amp. Yes, I have some older SVTs. I'm using the grind on that, gang, 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 from the amps. Like you, the fatness from the DI always seems to be tighter. Secrets, I'll use a rat pedal sometimes on my bass amps to get a little bit of, it's not like the mid-range of that distortion. I'll use a FET 47 on my bass cab, and I'm using Ampeg 810. Big, you don't want to bring that one on tour. And then I'll use I've been using a Soyuz. Can't remember, it's their little condenser, but I'll actually push that back from the amp a couple feet just to get a little of the room. Seems to work well as long as you get the phase right. Then I've been compressing bass a lot with two Audioscape compressors right now. An Optocomp.
Nice. Which Audioscape?
I've been using their Optocomp and also their VComp. So I'm using on both bass mics. I use both of those Audioscapes. Seems like in the records I'm always putting a little bit of distortion on the bass.
Sure.
Because I think it blends with the guitars better.
It does. It just kind of locks it, doesn't it? Yeah, it makes those guitars feel naturally bigger. It's interesting. I remember Tom Lord Alge mixing my band's album in 96. When, there was like a period like 96, 97, Tom was like the biggest mixer.
Yeah.
Every indie rock album that was on the radio.
Yeah, for sure.
Was all being mixed by Tom. And I know when he mixed, I was playing bass on this record. When he mixed the bass, he has two different bass sounds. They had the bass sound when it was drums and bass on its own. And then he had the bass sound when it was drums, bass, and guitars. Drums and bass was like,
yeah.
As soon as the guitars came in, he went, no. It just went really narrow. It was really quite strange hearing it in solo.
You know the Andy Wallace bass trick? His bass trick is an SPX 90 with chorus and quite a bit of chorus. So Andy on the SSL will have one mono bass track, usually channel 17. He'll have a stereo bass track with the SPX 90 on. It's a pretty significant chorus. And it's brought up to blend with the mono. So you have the mono bass and then a stereo chorus bass brought up.
Wow.
So that is the only hardware piece that we will insert.
That logically feels like he's got his mono bass coming down the middle, then he's got this stereo kind of chorusing on the bass. Presumably that helps lock it to the guitars and makes the guitars feel bigger. When the guitars aren't playing, does he mute or bring down that chorus sound?
Yes, definitely. Because it's never really a time that I've noticed when the bass is by itself that it's heavily chorused. So he'll focus, and a lot of times what he'll do in the chorus, big guitars, he'll bring the stereo up more just to make the chorus maybe a dB or two, make the chorus pop more. And then the verse, he'll definitely keep it more mono, so then the chorus feels bigger when he brings up that. So I picked that trick up from him. That was a good Andy Wallace trick.
So when I was talking back to the Tom Lord Allergy thing, so he had like the bass in the verses where there was no guitars playing or very little, maybe one line, be quite low endy and all this kind of stuff. And then it, as I say, got narrower in the choruses, and he let some of the guitars kind of double some of that low end. I'm really wondering where you high pass your guitars at. It's interesting because so many modern guitar players are like in A, and yet there's no way a low A, you know, if you let that ring out, it would just kill the bass guitar, kill the kick drum. It would just be,
It's actually funny because Andy never high passed guitars.
Really?
Before we started working together. It's not like Andy would actually take the low end on the SSL and just lower the bass.
Oh, okay.
Which was, he just did it a different way. And and this, not that I ever taught Andy anything, so that's not, but I said, Andy, we would just shelf the guitars or high pass the guitars a little bit at like 70 or 80, depending on, because we don't do a lot of real, super low stuff, except for Gojira. They were doing some pretty low stuff. Maybe like 70 we would do the filter at. But yeah, Andy's not big on the filters. But we started using, in general, not big on filters. Just usually, if he's hearing too much low end, he's literally going to go with the low end on the SSL and just lower, find the frequency and lower it a few dB.
Okay, so he's not high passing the super lows on the guitars.
Andy's very straightforward. If there's too much low end, I'm going to go find the low end, just lower it.
Well, I mean, his stuff always sounds larger than life, and I think maybe that not only doing the right thing is probably what I'm hearing. Just do the right thing as opposed to just doing things for the sake of it.
It's not super technical. Now, I think when a lot of people look at Andy, and Andy obviously knows, he knows his way around an SSL better than anyone in the world. But Andy doesn't think like, hey, this is 130 hertz, or this is 2K, let's lower that. He'll literally just grab the channel. It doesn't even matter where it is. I don't think he's looking at it, and he's just feeling it. And sometimes you look at it, it could be boosting, 12, 15 dB, whatever, and he's not even looking, because sometimes if I'm running Pro Tools, and they'll be like, take the green knob down a little bit. It's not like, hey, let's take 200 hertz down here. He'll just feel it out, and it's an interesting way of working. It's all ears. All ears.
Oh, it's the best way of working.
It's all, I mean, I'm saying this all it's all, really hyping Andy up because it's all true. His ears are so good.
Where's your studio based? Where are you?
I'm in the Poconos, Stroudsburg, which is an hour and 15 minutes outside of Manhattan. It's nice. I mean, I crave leaving the studio once in a while because everyone comes to me, and I have to be honest, I'm going a little bit stir crazy. I'm in this room all day, every day. And I'm like, will someone please hire me at another studio at some point? Like when I went to Stockholm.
Do you have a tracking room there as well?
Yeah, I have a nice tracking room. I have a lot of vintage gear. I have a bunch of 1081s. I have some Wonder Pre's.
Nice.
I have a lot of racks and racks of vintage gear. I got some all blackface 1176s. I got some 1966 or 7 LA2A, and another one's a little later.
So what are you working on at the moment?
I just finished a new Fuel record. So I co-produced that one, engineered it. I was going to mix the record, but I don't know. I'm kind of a little too inside that one to mix it. I think it would be better mixed by someone else or a different perspective. Worked in that record for quite a while. Coming up is Bowling for Soup. Those guys are awesome. So I have that coming up in July, and lots of mixes. I love to produce bands. Yeah, I think I'm real, because I'm a kind of a hermit. So I really enjoy mixing because I can really geek out and And I think mixing is probably my strong point. I do like to produce. I play guitar. I think stronger point is mixing. I hope, at least.
Look, the Ghost record sounds phenomenal. Must be exciting waking up and just being like, wow, we've got the #1 record.
It's interesting, right? Because long career, and I think it's awesome. It's like the greatest thing in the world. But as a mixer and engineer, you wake up the next day and you just do what you did the day before. You just keep working and working, and I'm kind of a workaholic. And some of my friends will say to me, "Hey, you should enjoy it, go celebrate." I just keep doing what I did the day before. Maybe I should celebrate things a little more, and I appreciate it more than But I just get up, and whatever's in front of me, I try to make that the best it can be.
That is exactly what you should be doing, my friend. Quite enlightening. I love it. Thanks for all these little tips and tricks.
Oh, hey, no problem.
Been pretty awesome. It's weird about the SPX 90 chorus. So I think somebody was telling me, what about reverbs? Wasn't it also SPX 90?
It was for a while. It hasn't been in quite a while. It's 480L mostly. And the 480L, not even anymore. That's UAD plugin. The 480L I had got noisy, really noisy. And I tried to get it repaired a few times. So now it's a UAD 480L plugin.
Oh, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, your education stuff. Kasia told me that you have a school.
I do. It's called Soundmind Recording Academy. We actually just built a new building. We built a big pole barn to be able to do bigger classes. Does really well. I do probably no more than 5 or 6 students at a time. And it'll be depending on what their skill level is. I end up doing mostly more masterclass type of stuff. But sometimes I'll do younger kids, but I'll group the same knowledge level of kids together. But I haven't been able to do as many classes as I used to do, with mixing schedule. But I'm trying to figure out a way to do more.
You have a console in there, you're saying? You get people actually on a console and show them?
Yeah, on a console. And then I also have an Atmos Room. I've been doing more teaching in the Atmos Room also. So, yeah.
How much Atmos work are you getting?
I'll give you the real quick story about the Atmos. When I did Ghost in Para, which was 2023, the label had called me. Ghost is on Loma Vista. Ryan Wally had said to me, "Do you mix in Atmos?" And I said, "Yeah, all the time." And I had never mixed in Atmos. So,
I was about to say, you just kind of say yes and then figure it out afterwards. Yeah, I understand that.
I didn't even have an Atmos Room. I knew almost nothing about it. So I ended up kind of rigging up an Atmos Room in my B studio, which is upstairs. Had some Quested monitors, luckily, but I scrounged together a bunch of other Quested monitors from eBay and this and that, and mixed the whole Ghost record in Para and didn't get one revision.
Wow.
Not one. So
you'd mix the album. So were you printing it as stems? You're printing the stems. Okay.
Yeah. So it was basically the SSL mix that I spread out wider, put some kind of little bit of effects on,
When you printed the stems, did you do the bus trick? So the master bus compressor was compressing the same each time because you were sidechaining it from the full mix?
Correct. Yes. That's really important to do that because you kind of lose a lot if you don't do that. But yeah, so I get a fair amount. One of the reasons I expanded, and I now have a really, nice big Atmos Room, because Loma Vista asked me to do Ghost's entire catalog. So that was about 70 songs. So I've got my hands on there. So I do a fair amount, and not if I'm mixing 7 days a week, maybe a half day would be Atmos Mixes. I think it was smart to put the room in, but it hasn't taken off yet.
I love it. I think done properly, it's absolutely incredible. But
done properly, I turned down a lot of Atmos Mixes. I'll tell you why. By some fairly established artists, they won't have the stems, or they won't have the Pro Tools sessions anymore, or any multitracks. And they've asked me to make make Atmos Mixes off of the stereo mix. You can do it, but it's really not. You don't want your work going out there like that. It's not cool. You can kind of fake it, and I know people do it, but I won't do it. I don't think that's like sending a bad mix out. But yeah, you could get a lot of work if someone just wanted to Atmos some stereo mixes, but it's not good.
But then again, budgets for that aren't that great either, are they?
They're
Labels want
not.
it done, but they don't want to pay for it to get the kind of care and love that maybe, would stop people complaining about some of them. Because I agree, some of them are incredibly substandard. You're listening to it.
Oof. You wonder how I've heard some where there's a vocal is almost non-existent because I don't know exactly what they real. This is my last story about the Ghost Atmos mixes. The first Atmos mixes I ever did, I mean, if you know how to mix, you know how to mix an Atmos. It's not like, but there are some specific, it's -18 LUFS, and you got to watch where you pan stuff. And when I was in Immersive Studio in Stockholm, the crew from Dolby was there because Immersive has an amazing Atmos. It's like I can't remember what the studio was before it was Immersive, but it was a classic, great studio. My assistant, Vesma, she brought me down to meet guys from Dolby. And they asked, "Oh, what are you working on in the other room?" I said, "I'm working on the new Ghost record." And like, "Oh, we love Ghost. We use Call Me Little Sunshine as our rock Atmos mix demo." Like, "Did you do that?" I was like, "Yeah." That was the first Atmos mixes I ever did. And they're using it as their rock demo.
Wow.
I don't know.
Well, hey, sometimes
I got lucky.
Just get it right first time.
Yeah. And it's just using your ears. It's nothing. There's nothing. There are some little tricky panning because you have something panned. It's not necessarily going to show up that way when you do the render. So you got to kind of be careful with your pan stuff.
Well, look, this has been an absolute pleasure. You're great at what you do. The record sounds absolutely phenomenal. We will put links down below to your site and, of course, the album so everybody can go and stream it and listen to it and all kinds of good stuff.
I appreciate it.
Congratulations.